Welcome to the Wolf Den podcast. We are your co-hosts, Naku and Zenitsu. I'm talking with Zenitsu here today about the Digimon national events and how our thoughts on the current meta. We will be going over the decks we think that will perform, how the tournament will play out, and break down the decisions that national participants will have to make. We have the advent of recording after the EU Nationals event so that we may, discuss those results and see how they may affect or influence ours, or if we believe the North American Nationals will play out similarly to the EU Nationals. So, I think the easiest place to start would be to just discuss the specific decks and what do we think those top tables are going to look like.
Well, I think a lot of the top tables is going to be a lot of Jesmond and Gabumon. I think that the popularity and power behind those two decks is very, very attractive. And I think the third best deck that we're going to see a lot of to try to counteract that is going to be either Three Musketeers or Security Control. I'm just labeling it as some sort of control deck to try to keep the others in check.
Yeah, I mean, um, anyone who's followed the BT6 EX1 meta will know like what the top decks are, and not a whole lot has really changed moving into EX1. Um, I would say that while Gabumon wasn't necessarily decidedly like the best deck, it was just definitely wasn't like Lord Nightmon status in for BT6 as Lord Nightmon was in BT5, but um, with the advent of the EX1 cards, I feel as though Gabumon gained like decidedly the most, and that's kind of pushed it ahead of the rest. And um, I know looking at the breakdown of the EU Nats top 16, it's 50% Gabumon, probably for that reason. And we're also pre Ice Wall restriction at the start of BT7, since that's also been announced.
Yeah, so like what's making Gabu Bond perform so well is the fact that there's not only just a couple of different variants on how you could play it, because you could play it with the ancient package and you could play it with more of a rookie rush approach. I think that the cards in the classic collection favor the rookie rush approach because you want to use the new Gabumon to help dig out your other Gabumons and your tamers. And that's going to be a lot easier done on a Rookie Rush deck when you just Digivolve that right away into a champion. Doesn't even matter what champion it is, as long as it's just something that's going to swing and have a high chance of survival. And then on top of that, like you said, Ice Wall is an absolutely insanely powerful card. That card single-handedly changes how blue plays defensive options, because now they no longer really feel like they need to run Cocytus Breath and Security. They just run Ice Wall, and it's good both on the play and in the security. So that definitely is a huge boost to Gabumon's performance. And Analog Youth, that card is also a really good card. I think that card's more favored in the Ancient variant because you have both Ancient and Bond to use it with, but it's still just a very, very powerful card to be using just for consistency's sake. And the extra memory and extra basically breeding phase or raising phase also helps push those aggressive decks even more to be even more aggressive because you could just swing out, have it die, and then just reload right away.
Yeah. Um, I guess I could have looked this up beforehand, but does Analog Youth work with Gabumon? Like the it deleting itself count for Analog Youth's restack effect or restand effect?
Yeah. So it's basically the same ruling as what Ancients does. So the Ancients basically at the end of the turn they kill themselves, and then that would as long as they have an inheritable source, which in order to get up to bond, you're gonna have to have an inheritable source, and that will then meet the conditions to trigger analog youth to basically get a new raising phase.
Yeah.
And that's just really, really powerful, especially if you could line it up where it's just like, okay, pass my turn at one, this dies, memory goes to zero, hatch a new egg, redigivolve, reload, and then you could just end your turn with an ice wall or just playing a generic three dropper, whatever you feel like doing.
Yeah. Um, That's kind of crazy. Like just that specific line of play that Blue has access to now, where they keep the tempo, they keep the aggression with the being able to digivolve off of um well, I guess they wouldn't be able to digivolve off that. I guess they could. Yeah, they could digivolve off of the egg before the end of their turn. No, because the egg gets hatched at the end. But so they don't get that.
Yeah, but
But
if you didn't pass your turn, then you just digivolve on top of it right away into a new rookie. And that's the power of Analog Youth aggressively. And the crazy thing is it also works with Agubond. Agubond I think takes a little bit better advantage of it because it has Skull Greymon to want to aggress with also. And I think that Agubond is still a very good deck. It's just on the defense, it's not as strong, so it has to rely a little bit heavier on harder removal options, which could be both a good thing and a bad thing because there's those situations where it's just like, oh, I really wish this Gaia Force was in the security and not my hand. And then it's just like, ugh, hard playing a Gaia Force at this stage of the game, that's not worth it.
yeah, definitely. Because even the security control decks have um, they've kind of reeled back from the just like hard play, hard removal cards. They have um, a lot more options. Meaning two things that they can use. But I know you are a big fan of the ancient Gabumon, but not a single of the 8 Gabumons in the EU top 16 ran an ancient package. But I think
No,
that's
I
yeah, I think it's more to do with the EX1 package definitely skewing that. Before it was at least arguable that they were more comparable. The results didn't necessarily agree with you there, but um, I see the benefit of running it, but yeah, as of EX1, Icewall and the new Gabumon just take up too many slots.
No, I definitely saw the like I think just the Rookie Rush variant just took over just because like I said, EX cards line up a little bit more cleanly with how the Rookie Rush variant plays. Because you also get like really powerful cards like Ikakumon, which is like one of the best sleeper cards probably in the whole set because it could attack into unsuspended Digimon. So in something like the Mirror, they hard play a rookie, you're just going to swing with the Kakumon, kill their rookie, and then just like aggress with whatever tools you feel like you need to. Like it's a very intricate matchup, and it is kind of RNG based, but that's just the nature of card games, where it's just like you really have to play smart on when you should attack the security and how much you need to be attacking with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gabumon definitely benefits from the experience players have playing like those Rookie Rush styles of decks from formats past. It's you know almost Rookie Rush 2.0. I know Rookie Rush still exists in um, altered capacities nowadays, but like it's the spirit, it's the meta representation of Rookie Rush in my like opinion when I go to like rank like the evolution of deck archetypes over time, I would still definitely put Agubond or Gabumon both in the like Rookie Rush category still.
Yeah, they definitely have the spirit of what Rookie Rush is attempting to do. And even though like Rookie Rush actually was a little bit more control heavy, in terms of the truer sense of like what Rookie Rush is, it's a little bit more control heavy, but like you still have very aggressive cards and very aggressive plays that you're basically just trying to abuse the fact that you're not digivolving a lot and still getting lots of value off of your cards.
So that do they think that is a good representation of Gabumon, but moving on to Jesmond, who I guess surprisingly to me at least did only had one top in the EU Nats. Um, which because I thought that Jesmon got a decent helping from EX1. Not necessarily as much as Gabumon, but something. Like a lot of decks saw either no change, I guess no change, or like one or two cards change. Like people can splash in Analog Youth, but I think Analog Youth, while it definitely benefits Gabumon, I think the spirit of Analog Youth is very in line with what Jesmon wants to do, or at least a version of Jesmon wants to do. Because I know we've seen a lot of Jesmons that like kind of just go for the God stack, like the Exodia stack, but um, I think Analog Youth may push Jesmon players more towards not necessarily caring as much about the specific god stack, because if you can still get out and swing for 2 security, and then if the Jesmon happens to go away, Analog Youth resets you faster. So you care less about it dying on the turn that you swing.
I think there's definitely some truth to that. I've actually I haven't really seen a whole lot of Jesmons use analog youth. A lot of them have just been opting to use emergency program shutdown or emergency program halt, whatever the actual name is. Emergency program, I'll just label as that.
Yeah.
A lot more Jesmon players decided to start using that card because it's just a little bit easier and a little bit safer than just reloading. Just because it's easier to use that card to keep your Jesmon stack alive because it's going to be very hard for them to deal with your board with a whole bunch of Sistermons out, and then you just use the card because Sistermons are white, and then it just takes away a lot of potential kill options for Jesmon to actually die. So I think like that's the direction a lot of Jesmon players went in. But like the big problem that Jesmon still faces, which I think Analog Youth helps fix, is consistency. Like you Jesmon is a very awkwardly inconsistent deck because it's so greedy on what it's trying to do. It doesn't really have the deck space to run very many other things.
Um yeah, I definitely see that. But I've found Analog Youth fits well, it definitely fits very nicely into the Jesmon package. I've kind of even considered Analog Youth and Emergency Program Shutdown to be like a package, like a white package for Jesmon. I mean, you already have the Sistermon, so you don't necessarily need the Analog Youth. But usually, if you're running one, you're running the other. Um, but the Analog Youth, I've just in my list specifically completely just slotted out red memory boosts. It isn't as deeply digging as memory boost is, and it doesn't have the additional effect of giving you like the memory on the following turns, but it is a white tamer that turns on options if you ever really need to cast one without having a Sistermon out. Um, and it reloads you too, but it's also just one cheaper. You know, like 2 memory is it can be used to choke. It can just be used um, just not to pass over as much memory when really going for these plays. And it still does the same job as red memory boost without necessarily forfeiting like an entire turn.
I definitely see that. I think Jesmon unfortunately can't escape red memory boost, like especially if they're not running any ties. They definitely need a way to be like, okay, now I'm at 3 memory during my turn, so I could digivolve into Jesmon, swing out, and not pass the turn. I think that's like hugely important for Jesmon. Otherwise, you're just gonna digivolve all the way up in raising, and that's gonna waste a little bit more time and resources just because now your cards are a little bit less efficient because of the nature of the raising area.
Yeah, I wouldn't advocate for swapping them all out, but at my most greedy, I had essentially a Jesmon list that was like, heart of the cards build almost, where it was very greedy and it's like it just searchers and the cards that mattered. So I kind of searched for the cards that mattered, and if I didn't get them, then I lost. But um, I had some moderate success with it only because, like, obviously when Jesmon sees what Jesmon wants to see, it's theoretically the best deck in the game. It kills you very quickly in its like technically like optimal line of play. But um, I was running 3 memory boosts. I moved it down to 2, tossing in an analog youth. Like it's just very splashable.
Now, it is a very splashable tamer that could work in a very wide variety of decks. I was playing Three Musketeers, and I was just like, wow, I could actually make Analog Youth good in this deck. And I was like trying to theorize. This is going to sound crazy. I was theorizing and theory crafting a version of Three Musketeers where I used Mega Digimon Fusion because I can use it with Analog Youth. And I felt like it was not a bad direction to take the deck, just because Mega Digimon Fusion, while it is going to be banned in BT7, it's not currently banned now. And I think that card is still very powerful.
Yeah. Um, MDF definitely still very strong card. First and only banned card. Um, but um, I feel like it's almost like kind of off topic in a way, but people are adjusting their current deck lists like for cards that like, oh, this card is gonna get banned in the future, so might as well not play it now. Like, I've seen people like try and make those arguments almost, especially with Ice Wall. Like, oh, cool, you're playing for Ice Wall. Be like, yeah, no, of course I am. Like, why wouldn't I?
Yeah, I got that a lot on a lot of my videos when I started doing some BT7 decks. It's just like, oh, I'm playing in Lilith Loop 4 copies of Jesmond for BT7, and that card's getting restricted to 1 come BT8. So it's just like they were like trying to argue with me, where it's just like, why are you running the optimal version of the build when it's just going to change the next set anyway? And I'm just like, that's kind of awkward if you like actually just read what you just said and what are you're telling me. But like I get that it needs to be changed. It's just for now it doesn't.
Yeah, and I think like, um, not necessarily to put any of those people with those opinions down. Like, if you really want to like preemptively like nerf yourself, go be my guest. Like, but um, it is the nature of card games for like deck lists to evolve over time, and like just instead of we don't have to deal with a rotation or anything like that, but we just deal with Ice Wall going from 4 to 1. So right now it's at 4. Use it at 4. Enjoy it at 4, and remember it fondly when you only have one of them in the future.
Right. And like going back on Dex change, it's just like I was doing a lot of research on Jesmon for BT7 and BT8, seeing if there's anything from BT8 that I could adopt into BT7. And I noticed there's a lot of subtle changes that go and happen for one deck in between sets, especially one as powerful and popular as Jesmon. So like the Awakened cards are hugely powerful in BT7, but come BT8 for Japan meta, they almost never used any of them. And I was just like, what happened to make them want to cut a whole card that was previously used a decent amount of? And that's like interesting to see how decks evolve and change because just of those subtleness changes of the meta and what cards are coming in and out.
Yeah. Um, I have done less research on like BT7 Japanese metas. BT7, I think I'm the least. I'm almost more aware of the BT8 slash EX or BT8 or EX2 metas than I am of BT7. It's like the one spot where when it was the most current meta in Japan, I wasn't really following the scene at all. But going back to EX, I know a big point of contention among Jesmon lists is the rookie lineup because I've seen some very different spreads and people value some widely different options. I know.
Yeah,
Um,
I've I've seen that too.
I think are they the same effect, both the Biomon and the starter deck Guiomon when
No, so
attacking?
the Biomon is when attacking a player, aka their security, then you get the draw. The Guilmon is just whenever a Digimon is deleted during your turn.
Okay.
So they're a little bit different, but they both require you to do something to try to draw on a higher stage. And I think that might be a little bit of like a crux for Jesmon players because if they're trying to dig and look for their Jesmons, most of the time they're not going to try using those types of cards to dig out your Jesmon because it requires you doing something on your mid-stage Digimon. So I actually, personally, have been going with the promo Guilmon still for my Jesmon, just because if I'm like bricking and trying to get out of my brick, I think that card's a little bit easier to unbrick with than some of the others that require more cards and various different actions.
Yeah. It's just interesting that like um as opposed to like Gabumon, like where people seem to be fairly set in like their spreads and their lineups. I don't see anything a little like too crazy there. Amongst like how many Gabumons they're running and which Gabumons they're running, but like the Jesmon players aren't in as in step. Definitely like that big contention. Also, just the level 3 red rookies that don't draw. Um, trying to like
like Mono Dramon.
yeah. See, I'm looking now.
Like
Obviously, you run
I do
Hookmon.
know what you're talking about. Like a lot of the base Jesmon players will just end up slapping in four Huckmons, four promo BUs, and then kind of just four of whatever they feel like. A lot of them don't even actually use the Geels because they might not be running the Gallant to make the Geel have extra value.
Mhm.
I like the extra value, but that's just me. My Jesmon list is trying to be greedy, but not as greedy as some of the others. Because I was noticing, like, oh, only running four level fours, or not four level fours, four level fives, and have it just be Savior is probably the worst idea I've ever seen in a deck build. It's so greedy that like it rarely actually works, and the second all four are gone, you're now locked out of doing anything with Jesmon in the future. And it's like it's actually it hurts me personally seeing lists like that. And I'm just like I started splashing in more level fives, and I was playing around with some level fives. And I just think right now the War Growlmon from the starter deck is probably the best alternative level five as like a good two of to run.
Yeah, that's actually what I run currently in mine. Um, I had experimented around a little bit with Voltramon, the plus security level 5, but um just the I guess the real uh, choice made in the rookies before we move on is the starter deck Agumon beat the starter deck 7 Agumon plus 2000 DP. Um, I've seen a lot of people running it. Maybe it's just because it's a good card that's better than the original like starter deck Agumon that is easily accessible for players that want to run Jesmon. But um, I don't know if that extra 2000 DP has ever mattered.
When you're in Jesmon, it 110% does not matter. You almost want almost no DP boosts in Jesmon outside of the Sistermon CL. Just because like she's the only one that matters and it's a static for your turn and the opponent's turn. So it's just strictly better than anything else. And then the only other place they usually put DP boost is on the egg
Hmm.
because red has literally nothing else on their eggs. So it's just like, well, might as well boost it by an extra 1,000 just because that's the only thing we could do. Um, but yeah, I think that Agumon is more used for the mid-level cards. So it's just like if you need to aggress with, let's just say, your War Growlmon, then it becomes a 10k level 5 that does something versus an 8k. And sometimes that can make or break it living or dying in security depending on the matchup.
Yeah, I think like the biggest time it would matter, I'm just thinking of like different stacks and situations where if you're swinging with Jesmon and you don't have a CL, you play a Blanc and um just for the like you have a Sistermon, you get the plus DP and the piercing. Um, but so that's 14 from the Jesmon itself and plus 1,000 from Demimera. That only puts you at 14, which doesn't swing over
You have 15.
7 or 15. It doesn't swing over level 7s in security. So you could swing into an Omnimon and just die.
Yeah, but most people right now are only playing like
One
the
to
only
two of yeah.
Omnimon. Yeah, the only Omnimon that's being played that's 15 is Zwart.
Hmm.
Everyone has elected if you're playing OG Omnimon, like the classic Omnimon, it's going to be BT5 version Omnimon just because that card's good for literally one thing and one thing only, and that's closing out games. And
Yeah.
that's the one thing you need it to do is just be like, "Oh, surprise, extra attack, I win the game." It's
Hmm.
it's just a you win button. But the
So
only 15k that I notice people playing in terms of level sevens is Zwart, and that's basically it. Because the bonds are all 14. If yellow is for whatever reason still using chaos, he's 14. Um, you have defeat, which is 13, millennium, which is 13. So like the 15s is just only in one matchup.
Yeah. Well, and it's just my bias showing because I run two Alter S, which is also 15, but nobody plays black, so it's fine. Um, so I guess yeah, that DP really just doesn't matter. Um, so back to what you were saying about the level fives in Jesmond though. I um I've seen the lists that run just the four savior, and I understand the reasoning behind it because, you know, if I don't see savior, I lose. So I might as well make that like actually true. Like if I don't see a level 5, I lose. So that's the justification, I guess.
Yeah, like it's super greedy, and if you're running enough searches to support it, it's not like the worst thing in the world. And that's where Analog Youth starts coming in handy, where it's just like, okay, you really need to see your level 5. Here's a nice cheap card to just help try to dig. And that's why they also play Red Memory Boost is for that same reason. And it's just like, well, like you said, if they don't see their level 5, then they're still gonna lose, and it doesn't necessarily matter what level 5 it is. uh, so it's like you might as well just play the one that you want. Although I personally think that's a little bit too greedy for my tastes. But I mean, hey, if it works for some people, it works for some people.
Yeah. I mean, um results bias may come into play, but I can definitely see if a Jesmon list does well, or like if like the one or two Jesmon lists that make it, however many there will be, um, they may not necessarily be like the most like safe versions of the deck or the most even potentially like technically optimal versions of the deck, though optimal is obviously very arguable, but because if you see savior every time, it doesn't matter whether you're running other level 5s.
Right, because that's the only one you want to see, and that's the only one you're realistically going to want to use. I just like the safety net of having other level 5s in the deck just in case and just because. And I think like a lot of NA players generally favor safety and consistency on top of like how powerful this deck is. So a lot of like why people ran security control in such high numbers in North America versus other regions is because people just want that safetyness. They just want the ability to actually consistently be able to play their deck. And Jesmon bricking is one of the worst feelings in the world, which is like why people run it to try to beat the brick. And when they do, they win. But if they don't, then it just feels very, very bad.
Yeah. So I guess less contentious of a point is running other level 6s in Jesmon, because I've also seen people forego the 1 to 2 of Gallantmon or BT1 War Greymon, or I guess even the other, like the original Gallantmon that trashes security even. Like, what are your thoughts on like actually running like supporting level 6s in Jesmon builds?
I think the depending on your builds, the level 6 needs to make sense with what you're doing if you're going to be using it at all. So like the whole reason why people are only going to run 4 Jesmons most of the time is because the way Digimon decks work is like a pyramid. So you want to see the least of the card that you're going to end up using the most, because your steps 1, 2, and 3 are going to help dig to your step 4. So, like, that's kind of the logic there, especially since you already have lots of other cards that are going to help dig. So, like, Jesmon doesn't realistically need another level 6. It's just one of those safety net type of situations where it's just like, if I have to run literally one or two of a supporting Mega, like, what is it going to be and why is it going to be in the deck?
Yeah, in my list, I've only cut it down to the original Jesmon. I still I like the idea, and I really hope someone in one of these like streamed matches like gets there, but like the idea of actually using the starter deck Guilmon into starter deck Gallantmon, like that option I still hold on to. I don't think it's good enough necessarily to run anymore, but I hope somebody runs it.
I cut it down to one gallant and two Geals. Just because like the Geel is the harder draw to trigger most of the time, versus the Biomon. And like you said, it is just gonna already be very, very slim for that combination of plays or combination of cards to actually matter. But like I do think out of all of the different level sixes, Gallantmon is still one of the better supporting cards just because of that warp potential. And he's just actually a solid replacement for Jesmond because the starter deck one. You could
Hmm.
use the older one, the BTO2 one, but like I wouldn't recommend it because that's just not what Jesmond's about.
Yeah, I I originally had seen it mostly in like response to like the rise of security control and like Three Musketeers kind of being like a pseudo option zoo style of deck where the ability to like warp and then swing and then trash security, especially if it's later in the game, like there are situations where that card just destroys Three Musketeers after they trash their whole deck. But
Yeah, the only problem with the card is the Evo for 4, which is what makes it really good with the Guilmon, because like you already are gonna have to pay for it to warp. So it's not like it's that bad on tempo. It's just literally in every other situation where it's just like I need this to be a replacement Jesmon, and it's just not efficient enough of a card to be the replacement Jesmon.
yeah. Um so do you value the War Greymon then? Is even like a one of potentially is like what like a third copy of Delicate Plan basically?
I think again it all comes down to the build. I think if they don't run any of the Guilmons and they're just going full Biomons and various other cards, I think the Greymon is still pretty good just because of the consistency and basically him being an extra delicate plan. Plus, like if you need to just throw out your Omnimon just to do it anyway, like it's also a very good card to do that with, just because Omnimon is going to be very obnoxious for a lot of decks to handle. Like control decks already have a hard enough time killing it twice. Uh, and the fact that now it's going to help break your security and put lots of pressure on the opponent is like the icing on the cake.
Yeah. So I don't really know what much more to say. Do you have anything else for Jesmon before we move on?
Not really. I think Jesmon is only going to do as well as his numbers allow him to do. So, like, he's a deck where obviously the more people that are going to run him, the higher chance a Jesmon is going to have to do well. And I think he's in such a popular demand in terms of like what decks are being played, where that is a very strong likelihood where we're going to see like one or two Jesmons just because of the sheer volume of Jesmon players.
Yeah. I'm not as in tune with the EU meta, but I do think that NA players care about Jesmon. They like Jesmon, and I guess the alt art prices for the Jesmon like staples show that. Um, but um, it's just really gonna come down to whether they make the right like tech choices or not, and if they see the cards they need to see.
And if their matchups are good. Because I've beaten a Jesmon in one of my last events through a negative matchup, like extremely negative matchup, and I managed to win just because I was able to outmaneuver the Jesmon. So like it does still come down to skill and luck at the same time on who you're facing and what your matchups are, on top of what your tech is, like you said.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny because like as I've stated before, I play black. I've kind of bounced between black Royal Knights, black blockers, some hybrid of the two, and the Jesmon matchup is by far my worst. Like at me playing an anti-meta deck, Jesmon is still my worst matchup. But I've played it so many times, I'm way more comfortable in like the Jesmon matchup than I am against like a Diaboromon or a green or even like a Lord Nightmon. Just decks that you don't see nearly as often.
Right.
So given that, I actually do think um the third one like really worth talking about is Diaboromon. Now, this may just be sample size, but the three tops out of the EU Nats, I think is the like largest like meta litmus test of like these results so far. Without like digging too far down into like exactly what like the rest of the player base brought. Um, I've spoken with like Diaboromon players, and it is a very good matchup into Gabumon specifically.
See, I don't have exactly that matchup data to like give a hard concreteness on, but like I have built multiple iterations of Diaboromon. My brother does play Diaboromon. I have a Diaboromon built. I just am not super seasoned on it because I play a little bit of everything. But I do think after a lot of Diaboromon exposure, Diaboromon is one of those types of decks where if you build it correctly, it can do absolute wonders for you just because he has lots of different tools to tackle various different situations and handle various different problems.
Yeah. Um, and it really all just comes down to like not that Diaborom's this radical new deck that serves to play the game any differently than it used to, but um, the unique nature of the Diaboromon tokens being um, level 6 blockers with only 3k DP um, is really interesting because,
Not so much a decoy. Like the
yeah,
one big difference that we have that Japan didn't was the decoy Kurisarimon. So like that could affect things hugely, especially against matchups like Three Musketeers and Security Control, where now they just can't kill your Diaboromon.
yeah, and while it's not like an actual like point for Diaboromon doing well, from my experience in playing against it recently, um, it's one of those decks where you're not as obvious, especially in a webcam game, of like, okay, what Karasarimon is that? Like, what Diaboromon is that? Like, okay, tell me what your stack does, and you constantly kind of have to like ask because like you only play 3 or 4 different names in your deck, period.
Right, because it's literally just Caramon, Cursarimon, Inframon, Diaboromon. That
Yep,
is literally the deck right there.
there's enough versions of those copies of cards that like, and the archetype forces you to play those specific cards that um you really don't have. So, making mistakes are like, okay, do the tokens have blocker? Do the tokens have decoy? Like, what's the DP of everything? With the
Yeah, that's true, because now they actually have DP increasing.
yep, the plus 2000. Like, it's it's crazy. Like, it's just one of the like information starved matchups that you don't necessarily deal with as much. Like, um, because when you see that they digivolve into a Greymon and Jesmon, like I I know pretty much know which Greymon that is. I don't necessarily have to ask. Like whereas I digivolve to Infirmon, okay, that doesn't tell me anything.
Right, because which Inframon is it? Is
Yeah,
it the BTO 2 one? Is it the BTO 5 one? Or is it the Class Collection one?
yeah. So it's just something that I thought was kind of funny about how um I feel like I've played enough matches where I'm aware of what 100% of my opponent's cards do, and Diaboromon told me I was wrong. So
Yeah, I mean, like, before Diaboromon didn't have enough tools to where it was like, oh, this is just a very complicated deck because you have to, like, pick and choose which stacks you're going to go into. It was very simple and straightforward, which made it a very easy and approachable deck. And now that there's, like, just a whole bunch of more options and tech and, like, subtleness that you could do with it, it's definitely a lot more complicated of a deck. Because I've seen craziness like people splashing in Craniumon into the deck just to give the blockers indestructible basically. And that's an idea. That's definitely something you could do if you're more afraid of those control type matchups. Or depending on how your level 4 lineup goes, you could run more decoy or you could run uh the rush one. Like there's a lot that that deck can do.
yeah. Another play that kind of caught me by surprise from playtesting with it is that um, the erratas, like on paper, didn't like reading the card. I was like, oh yeah, that's an okay like tamer like for a very specific archetype. But um, you hit those later game situations where if he does have two or three errata out, like that's some decently high guaranteed memory. Um, and if they have the option of running like a single um, genuine memory tamer, so that they could start with three or five or six memory a turn potentially.
Yeah, that's already very dangerous depending on the Diaboromon stack because the BTO2 Diaboromon cards are still insanely powerful just because the Kurisarimon from BTO2 allows you to gain memory per Diaboromon spawning. So that's just a butt ton of memory on top of errata already starting you at a decent amount. So it literally just lets you combo off and do almost whatever you want just because you have the memory to do so.
Yeah. So I guess the next point would be the promo Diaboromon. I know every single list that topped ran two copies of it specifically, but I've also heard that it's unnecessary. I guess kind of like extra level fives in Jesmond. Like the idea of the one punch Diaboro is very real, but I don't know how often in practice that's how they close their games.
I doubt that that's how they close their games most of the time. I'm hard pressed to think that they rarely ever do that. I already am not super high on the card, not because it's expensive and I don't have a whole lot of him. That has zero to do with it. As a deck builder, I just think there's other things you could do to compensate for what that card is doing. So I personally don't think it's super necessary to run that Diaboromon specifically just because the deck can already punch the opponent's security all at once, just a little bit differently if you don't have access to it. So the BTO5 Rush Kurisarimon paired up with the token spawning cards, like that's already good enough. So again, it just goes down to what deck you're trying to build and how you're trying to use your cards dictates what cards you're actually going to be putting in your deck.
Yeah, I definitely think the Diaboromon list that we've seen for nationals, at least the EU one, have been more defensive in nature, only because of the like immediate tempo and aggression proposed by the current meta of mostly like Gabumon and Jesmon and Rookie Rush.
Yeah, I think the defensive nature only makes more sense because it doesn't have the ability to move as fast as those decks. It can't go from 0 to 11 in the drop of a dime. It actually has to like play the game somewhat fairly and build and progress to something, rather than just burst your way to victory and then just hope you have enough cards to reload and do it again. So I think the defensive nature makes a lot more sense, and that's kind of why they also want to run the One Punch Diaboromon promo. Just because it's just like, look, if I'm not really going to be doing anything, I need a card that can be very aggressive to just do lots of work very quickly. And that is just one of the better Diaboromons to do it with, even though it is completely optional for how you could build the deck.
Yeah. Um. I guess like um for me the Diaboromon is like the anti-meta deck of the potential nationals meta. Um. Because it doesn't necessarily have great matchups into the other decks of the meta, but if you really are banking on like just the strength that Gabumon received in Classic Collection, then Diaboromon has a favorable matchup supposedly into Gabumon. Um, then you just kind of hope to only play Gabumon players as far as you can, or stall out a Jesmon.
I think they have the ability to do that. Like, those two decks are going to be probably in the highest numbers anyway for an event, that it's very likely that you're going to be facing those. And if you're comfortable with those two matchups in terms of the aggro matchups, then you should be able to do very well with a Diaboromon deck.
Yeah. Um, the other black deck, I guess not the only black deck, but um, the I was very surprised, actually a little proud that a Machine Dramon topped the EU Nats. Um, the list, not that Machine Dramon is a very techy archetype. It's very similar to the one from your video. The only difference being that they ran um, like a couple different numbers of level fives, not necessarily even like they ran the same amount of level fives, just different quantities of level fives.
Yeah, the teching in which level fives you want to prioritize is probably the hardest thing about the Machine Dramon deck. And I think a lot of black decks in general are just anti-meta because like if you stop and think about what Machine Dramon is doing, it's a very, very interesting and unique deck where it's just like you hard play it, he fills up his sources, and then they're gonna have to figure out how to kill him several times, and then you just play another one and do the whole thing all over again. Like it's another very powerful like toolbox style of deck that could do lots of different things. And oh my god, the dig potential in that deck is actually insane. Like I have never seen a black deck be able to cycle through itself so efficiently than this deck before.
Efficiency is one word, but I know in the playtesting we've done in the team where I was piloting the Machine Dramon list that you put in your video, um, I was more likely to deck myself out than anything else, like if I wasn't careful.
Yeah, it's definitely a really interesting deck, but once it goes and it starts working and does its thing, it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really like the idea of um an alternative to um Three Musketeers like state-sponsored Megazoo. It is the theme of Megazoo without just running big expensive cards for the sake of running big expensive cards.
Right. There's like a purpose and a reason, and they make themselves cheaper, and usually they're just better than I'm just gonna hard drop this level 6 for 10 and then digivolve into a level 7. Like I think that style of Megazoo is slowly going away in favor of various other approaches, and I think they want to embrace that type of approach. And we definitely saw it in the design of, like you said, Bellastarmon, and again here with Machine where it's just like, look, you can play your big splashy super card and still do very well just by hard playing it.
Hmm. Um, yeah, the only real notable differences was that they ran two copies of the EX1 Red, I guess. Yeah, it is Megadramon, the EX1 Megadramon, which,
Yeah, for security attack plus, just to try to deal more damage quickly. I get that.
well, I saw that, but also it has an on-play effect in its own right. Delete two
Yeah,
3000 DP or less, so I can see that you can like while it's obviously not as tempo efficient to just play your level 5, you can use it as rookie removal if need be in the early turns of a Gabumon matchup.
yeah, and if they're running any other supporting level sixes, then you just digivolve it right away, or you just swing with it, and it doesn't matter because your Machine Dramon, if it dies, goes into your trash, and then you could just use it as a source in your trash. Like it's a very flexible card for how the deck wants to be played,
Yeah. Um so
especially
unfortunately,
against those god matchups. Like, oh
yeah.
my god, the killing rookies on play is really good.
Mhm. Cuz I don't think the bonds really they while they are rookie rush in nature, they've had to sacrifice some of their efficiency in rookies for the inheritables or the bond potentials and whatnot. So I don't think they run many 4K DP rookies, if any.
No, they don't. It's all about utility and ability. It's like, let me use this card to try to dig through my deck, and let me use this card for its inheritable because it just makes my stuff better.
Yeah, like the
Like there's no real efficiency in how they're playing like their rookies themselves. It's just their rookies want to make the deck itself more efficient.
so given the unique nature of this tournament, um, how do you feel the the 2 day structure will affect the deck building?
I think especially with how many people are entering, because I know there's a lot of people entering in it. I think you need to focus on consistency and actually being able to play your deck as best as you possibly can, rather than trying to play more greedy and hope things work out. I think that's just been the huge trend and shift between just JP data and NA, or just English data as a whole, is the fact that like Japan plays in best of ones. We play in best of threes. We need to make our decks more consistent because we have more games to play than they do. And I think that's going to be like the big driving force is how you can make your deck as consistent as you possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of always been the nature of like English versus Japanese deck building. Um, I guess more so, and I guess I'll answer my own question a little bit. Because the real decision has to be made less so about like greedy versus like highs and lows, but more about like you do have to make like meta calls. Like, um, does Jesmond run too delicate plan? Does can they get away with a one? I don't necessarily think they should run zero, but like, how likely are you to see musketeers or security control? And in so like, will those copies of those cards like because you have to really build your tech for the long run, right? You have to build it not knowing what the top 16 is going to be like, and just I don't even know if we might do a 32 in North America. I'm not sure, but um, just not knowing what that top will look like, but also not knowing every deck you're going to play, and you could still low roll. Like, you could still get matched up against some rogue deck that you're not sure how it plays, and being able to adjust, I think, is going to be a huge factor in like determining who makes it to those top tables.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of matchups are huge in Digimon. Sometimes you just run into a matchup where you just cannot win, and then sometimes it's the reverse where it's like sometimes the matchup doesn't matter at all, and it's more about who is the more skillful player and how they were able to handle the situations presented them.
So, I guess really looking back, um, at like all the decks we've gone over, like what meta calls did they really make? Like, um, I'm seeing some amounts of. Oh, is that a Pepsi? Is that a Lightning Joust and a Gabumon? That is a Lightning Joust and a Gabumon. Hot damn.
Yeah, that's super spicy tech.
Yep. Somebody that's yeah, number 6.
Lightning Joust is actually such a like super sleeper card because like if you already are playing a deck that's very aggressive and wants to damage itself anyway and put itself lower than the opponent, then it has a way higher damage ceiling than most of the other cards you could possibly think about playing.
So, yeah, it's really just going to come down to like for these decks, what are you teching? What are you expecting to play against and what matchups are you not as teched into? Like, um obviously if you feel better about a certain matchup or if you're more practiced on it, maybe you don't necessarily um tech as aggressively to beat that matchup. I know that I personally like every time I do lose to like a security control or a Three Musketeers, I like completely retune my deck for like a small amount of time just to like I am not losing that matchup. I may lose every other matchup, but I will not lose that one anymore.
I'm kind of the opposite. I'm just like, if I see it, so be it. I'm gonna die, but hopefully, depending on the event, you're just like, okay, I just am not gonna see it, period. So I think like at this point, we're like I was playing Three Musketeers as an example. I made a bad meta call by keeping in Millenniumon into my deck because I was afraid of the Black Blockers matchup, because that's just one of the worst matchups you could ever possibly see while playing not security control. I mean security control too. But that's one of the worst possible matchups you could see in Three Musketeers. But again, Schrodinger's cat, I didn't see any of it, so was it really beneficial for me to keep that card in my deck? The answer was probably no, and I should have just played two better outs to make my other matchups stronger because I ended up not doing as well as I wanted with Three Musketeers. probably because of that, but probably because of some of my matchups. And I could have teched my deck a little bit better to handle those other matchups a little bit better than I did.
Yeah, I'll take the fall for that one. That's my fault for putting that in your head. But um I see what you mean. Like you like the recency bias is huge sometimes where like, you'll be very confident in your build and then you'll lose to Jesmon and you'll be like, "Okay, well now what do I do? Like if I do I lose to Jesmon now? Do I just like could I have done that different? Like were there actual gameplay decisions that I made that could have affected that outcome or did I really just draw poorly or did he really just draw well?" And in those cases, you really can't go completely changing your game plan.
No, and that's kind of why like I'm not building my decks to be greedy. It's just I'm building my decks to the matchups that I'm most likely to see. So like while I still think black blockers could end up doing absolutely insanely well, just because again, it's another black anti-meta deck, it's just the chances and likelihood of you seeing that is going to be so astronomically low that it's not worth you trying to think about, oh, I actually need to think about this matchup now. Because Red Aguband, they have zero outs to black blockers, just as an example. You see a Mechanorimon, you see a Craniumon, the game is done. Like, it is actually not even a game at that point for Red Aguband. But the fact that nobody's running it is like why Agumon isn't afraid, is
Hmm.
because it's just not gonna be very likely they see it.
Yeah, you can't be afraid of something that you, in all likelihood, like statistically probably won't see. But
Right.
so, um, I guess kind of beginning to wrap up a little bit. Um, what would you say like? So we talked about all the decks. We talked about like the tech options for these decks, and um, what's your like projected? If you just had to like throw some numbers out, what does like an NA Nats top 16 look like to you?
NANet's top 16 is probably going to be 5 Gabumon, two Lilith Loop. Then we are going to see two Jesmon, one Diaboromon, one Machine Dramon, and one Security Control, or three Musketeers. I think three Musketeers is a little bit more favored in this meta than Security Control, so I'm going to say three Musketeers.
Hmm. I wasn't necessarily looking for that specific because I don't have anything that specific. I was gonna say like I definitely think less Gabubond. I mean, it's hard to really get more Gabubond than EU with them having 50% of it being Gabubond, but as strong as EX1 Gabubond is, I don't think it's 50% of the meta. And I don't think it'll hit 50% of the top tables either. I think we'll see a little less Gabubond. I do think we'll see more Jesmon, probably 2 to 3 Jesmon. Um, I think we'll see more Lilithroop, but I wouldn't even necessarily like attach Lilithroop. I think we'll see purple. There was no purple outside of Musketeers in EU. I think North American players play more purple in general. So whether it is Lilithloop or Titamon, I think purple will see some play at the top tables, 1 to 2. Musketeers, I feel like Musketeers kind of like fallen off a little bit. Like it hit real hard with like the waifu tax and like the alt arts for those staples are still really high. So still like those cards are clearly like in demand. People are playing it, but I haven't really seen it as much recently.
I would probably agree with that. A lot of people just aren't looking at Three Musketeers as they once were. And it's nothing like to Classic Collection's fault. I just think the attention is on other things, and I just to think that as a result, it just kind of makes it not as highly represented. And I do think that like the majority of those types of players also would play purple decks. So it's just like if they had the option between Three Musketeers or Lilith Loop, I think most of them are just going to be like, screw it, I'll go with Lilith Loop. It has a way higher ceiling and it can do way more against way more decks. So it's like it just sounds like the smarter answer.
Um, Hot take from ban announcement. I feel as like that's gonna push more people to play Lilithloop than less in North America at least. the ability to like this is it, like the next major tournament it'll probably be it'll be BT7, it'll be banned. So like might as well go out with a bang with, Queen Waifu.
I mean, I think even though Mega Digimon Fusion is getting hit, I still think Lilith Loop is going to be probably way more popular than it should be. Nothing like wrong with the deck or anything. I just personally don't enjoy sitting there watching my opponent not kill me for 15 minutes because they're looping and doing a convoluted combo. Just to end in a board state where it's like, okay, brick, like you either kill me now or I'm gonna do this again next turn and then kill you. Like I think it's a little bit too slow for my own personal tastes, and that's why I don't like it personally. But like it's still going to be a very represented deck, and people are going to adapt, and it's not going to die.
Hmm,
I think people are already looking at 60% win rate as the shift, and I think it's going to be a better shift for the deck overall and make the deck actually stronger, unironically.
that's a hot take. I I don't know how that's a better fit than the only banned card in the game, but um moving past that, I guess a little bit. I think that the real thing that I think will slow Three Musketeers down and like has slowed it down is that it kind of gets caught up like the same techs that work against security control, the big scary Gaia Force and security, like also hit Musketeers. So they kind of get caught up in that, and they're less greedy in those card choices. You're way more likely to survive a swinging into a Three Musketeers security than a security control security.
I would agree with that, yes.
So your Jesmons can play delicate plan and not necessarily always need it. Um, but I do think yeah, Lilith Tida gonna be up there. Um, I I don't know how supported Diaboro is really gonna be. How many people are gonna be able to pick up the deck? Obviously, we have the downside of like EX just came out for us, you know, 2 weeks ago. So if people really have like I don't think we see a machine Dramon, and I think we see less Diaboro, if any. Only because they're harder to just for people to like build the decks. They require a lot more EX cards than Gabumon does or Jesmon.
Well, not only that, those types of decks, like I don't want to call them rogue because like they're still obviously meta playable. It's just the amount of testing into like a Diaboromon player needs is a little bit more intensive than something like a Gabumon, where it's just like, okay, you know the matchup, you know how to play the deck because you've seen it so many times, versus Diaboromon, where it's just like I don't have a whole lot of Diaboromon experience, so obviously me picking up the deck for the first time, especially this iteration, is going to be a little bit daunting for players to want to do. And
Yeah.
it is just safer and easier to take other decks.
This kind of tournament, I think you really have to rest on your laurels a little bit. Like, I don't think unless you were someone who played like Diaboromon at BT5 and like had that small amount of experience with it, like I mean, I feel like the deck handles a lot differently now. Like
Oh, completely.
people are
The
just
new
gonna
cards change the deck completely.
yeah. I just mean like people are gonna play like not necessarily exactly what got them to nationals because a lot of people qualified in like BT5 mostly. I think at least in NA like almost exclusively BT5. Um
Plus,
so
there's a lot of store championship winners. Not discrediting store championship winners. It's just winning an event where it's like only 4 rounds is a little bit different than winning an event that's 7 or 8 rounds.
your store event was only 4 rounds. Jeez. I couldn't make either of mine, but both of them sold out at 64, I believe. Is that still 4 rounds? No.
A lot of mine were only doing a cap of 16. I think one of them did a cap of 32,
But yeah, mine.
just because there was that many players. So
I am definitely
there,
the outlier.
uh, my state's been playing things a little bit safe.
Yeah. Um, we've always had like a slightly larger local scene for Digimon. I guess like more players doesn't necessarily mean more competitive, but like I do feel like my locals is not definitely not to like the caliber of like any of the online regionals, but like Um, not just your Friday locals. If it's like some sort of special event, like a win a case, or stores near me have done multiple like win a PS5 kind of those level of events with like I guess roughly comparable entries like the $30 entry fees. Those tournaments are fairly competitive, like genuinely. Like I haven't gotten um, nearly as I've played much better games in person at those events than I have in some of my online events.
I could agree with that. Some of my local competition is pretty fierce. Shout outs to Eli uh for being such a good player.
um, so we've gone over like what we thought like the top tables do look like. Um, what's your like deck that you want to see make it to the top table, but deck that you don't think will? I guess
Oh
deck
God,
that you hope
the
that makes it to the
roguiest
top table. Like, yeah, what's your like?
the roguiest of rogue decks that I want to see succeed.
Well,
Oh
it's
God.
plausible. You can't just name like the worst deck, but like think of a deck that genuinely has a chance that like maybe not enough people are probably gonna play two top with, but that you think someone could top with. That's I guess like the hot take.
I want to say it's Machine Dramon, to be honest. Like,
Really?
it has such a good matchup against a lot of the control decks. So, like, you already feel very comfortable just by hard playing Machine Dramon against a lot of those decks because they won't be able to deal with it. And if you tech your deck correctly against the aggro decks, then you could still do relatively well. So, as you mentioned with the EU deck, they teched it a little bit more controlly, and then they still had the ability to punch. So it's like I think that deck has the ability to do very, very well. It's just a very difficult deck to build and not the most straightforward deck to pilot. So that might be a little bit off-putting, but I think a player who knows their matchups and can play it and has a good build, the deck is going to do wonders.
Yeah, I I could definitely see Machine Dramon being there. I don't necessarily think, like, I guess for the reasons we'd mentioned before, enough people are going to play it, enough people are going to have the stuff and the practice to, like, pick up a completely new archetype of deck for nationals, Now, I feel like this is something I also should have, like, known or looked at. Was EU invite only? I know some regions aren't,
Um, that I don't know. I think EU was invite only just because it is one of the larger regions.
so it must be, like, I think it's just Oceania maybe that's not invite only. But,
Oceania, and I think there was like Brazil or like South America.
hmm, um, but, um, I don't think anyone picks up and plays Machine Dramon, but just like general feel of the North American meta and like as people trying to like make things work that they maybe necessarily shouldn't. I think there's going to be some like it's kind of cheating, but like a green deck, like not necessarily Eosmon, but also probably Eosmon. Like
Oh, okay. I think if it's gonna be any green deck, it's just gonna be the same green deck we've seen for a while, where
yeah,
it's just like it's Reflexy Nidhogg, Ancient Troy control.
hmm
Like, just let me turn off your Digimon's ability to do anything.
and I've seen that matchup I think exactly twice, but in a best like two best of threes, and Ancient Troy does really well to stop Gabumon, but
Not to mention, Refleximon
mhm,
also does well to stop Gabumons because it's like, oh, if they don't have a Digimon in Raising, but they have one on their field and they have a mat sitting on the field, then they could just be like, okay, Refleximon, Digiburst, your
mhm,
Digimon can't attack. Have fun not bonding
yeah.
this turn.
It doesn't matter if you bonded; it's still not attacking. So,
Right.
yep, I do think it's like something completely absent from the EU meta. I think a green list makes it. I don't know how many there are people even thinking about bringing green, but I think green makes it. I think more people like will pick up green potentially as a result too. Like I guess that's really the spirit of the question is like what deck are people going to look at and be like, "Whoa, what is that?" and then like want to play it, having like
Right,
not seen it or played it.
right, because as we've seen like before, time and time again, like top players can win with almost anything because they're really skilled at the game. And then there's those top players where it's just like I got here on accident because the deck just had surprisingly good matchups that nobody really knew about because it wasn't something on a lot of people's cognitive radars.
Yeah.
And
So
green is usually one of those colors where it's just like it's there, it says hi, and it can definitely surprise people.
yeah, as someone like I really tried to make green work like early in Digimon, like and then yellow just kept coming back and back, and I made the swap. But um, people that like play green like green. I think there are some like strong green fanboys out there, like people that really want the color to succeed, even though it's like been consistently shafted. Um, so I think a green makes a top, at least enough to like cause some buzz. Like, ooh man, like what's this green build? What is he doing differently? You know?
Right. No,
So
I'd also like to say green too.
okay, amending your answer. I like it. Um, I believe that wraps it up for today. Um, is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we head out?
Not really. I think Nationals is going to be really interesting, and I'm curious to see where the next like big season of Digimon is going to take us. I know they're like prepping worlds and doing more grander things, but like they also need to take a step back and look at like what are we going to do for everyone else that's not competing. Even though the breaks are nice, not having an event literally every weekend, but there still should be something to help drive the competitive spirit forward.
Yeah, I definitely think that since they've done up Worlds the way that they are, like Nationals and then Worlds, like I know they announced it like kind of, but like now like really showing like the support they have with it, like the promo packs and the actual like first, second, what first, second, third, fourth, or first, second, third place, like unique cards. Like they're definitely like a healthy competitive scene to the game that um I and other people that I've spoken to have are very surprised about. They weren't necessarily like they could have technically just done nationals and worlds as like other card games have done in the past. Like you could maybe get like a trophy if you win, you get your name on like a plaque or something, but like you just win like a case, like a generic case. They could have just done that too.
Yeah, they could have took the easy way out, but the fact that they're putting effort towards these larger competitive events is definitely nice. I do think with all of this nice stuff going for the larger events, they still need to support the smaller events, and I'm really curious to see where the next season is gonna lead us.
Yeah. Um. So I guess to close this out, um, this hopefully won't be the last time we do this. I know this is the first time this has been done here on this channel, but I know Zenitsu and I have had many discussions that um, we've basically been like, man, we should have just recorded that. That would have been cool. That's kind of the idea behind what we're doing here. So we have a couple ideas lined up, but I know if any of you guys want to like just put down in the comments like suggestions or topic ideas or things to discuss, um, we
Or
could.
even if you like this and you want to see more.
Yeah, true. So with that, that's all I have. See you in the next one.
Later, guys.